Birds in the sky, passing through the sky, an arrow or a bird leaves no track. In Chinese and Indian philosophy, this is a recurrent metaphor, which is used strangely enough for things which do not seem to resemble each other at all. The swift, trackless flight of the arrow is used as an image of impermanence, of the passage of human life through time, of the inevitable truth that all things must at last dissolve and leave not a track behind. Yet in one of the sayings of the Buddha, the invisible path of birds through the sky is likened to the way of life of a sage, to the superbly self-effacing kind of man of whom a Chinese poem says, entering the forest, he does not disturb a blade of grass. Entering the water, he does not cause a ripple. So the image represents a number of qualities which are in fact aspects of the same thing. It represents the sage's freedom and detachment of mind, a sky-like consciousness in which experience moves without leaving any stain. As another poem says, the bamboo shadows sweep the stairs, but stir no dust. But the result is only acting a pretense and outward show against which the inner being rebels and brings to pass those severe mental conflicts which estrange man from life. Like the Native American scouts, he walks without a single twig, cracking beneath his feet. Like the Japanese architects, he builds a house which seems to be a part of its natural surroundings. The image also represents the fact that the way of the sage cannot be traced and followed, since no authentic wisdom can be imitated. Each man must find it for himself, because there is really no way of putting it into words, of reaching it by any specific methods or directions. But there is actually the most intimate connection between these two apparently separate uses of the metaphor, the way of the sage on the one hand and the impermanence of life on the other. And the connection reveals the one deepest and most central principle of those Asian philosophies which so puzzle the Western mind by identifying the highest wisdom with what to us seems the doctrine of abject despair. Indeed, the word despair, in a particular sense, is the proper translation of the Hindu-Buddhist term nirvana, to dispirit, to breathe out, to give up the ghost. We cannot understand how the Asians managed to equate this despair with ultimate bliss, unless, as we are prone to suppose, they are, after all, a depraved and spineless people, long accustomed to fatalism and resignation. I am constantly amazed at the way in which thoughtful Westerners, Christians in particular, seem almost determined to miss the point of this connection. For is not Christian imagery full of the theme of death as the essential prelude to eternal life? Is it not written that Christ himself gave up the ghost, having cried out that he was forsaken by God? And is there not in the Christian scriptures a sufficient abundance of paradoxes about having nothing yet possessing all things, about finding the soul through losing it, and about the grain of corn that comes to fruition by its own death? Yes, indeed, say the clergyman, but the Christian never really despairs. He never really dies. Through all tragedy, through all outward death and despair, he is fortified by an inward faith and hope that the best is yet to be. He faces the worst that life can offer with the firm belief that ultimate reality is the God of love and justice, in whom is his hope for the life of the world to come. Now, I think we say and feel and think so much about this hope that we miss the astounding eloquence of Buddhist silence upon the whole matter. So far as words, thoughts, ideas, and images are concerned, the doctrines of Buddhism and most forms of Hinduism are so negative and hopeless that they seem to be a sort of glorying in nihilism. They do not merely insist that human life is impermanent, that man has no immortal soul, and that in time every trace of our existence must vanish. They go on to indicate as the wise man's goal a release from this transient life, which seems to be no release at all. a state called nirvana, which may be translated despair, and the attainment of a metaphysical condition called shunyata, which is a voidness so void as to be neither existent nor non-existent. For non-existence implies existence as its logical correlate, whereas shunyatisnesi impossible me amthorpherinons. For non-existence implies existence as its logical correlate, whereas shunyata is so void that it does not imply anything at all. Beyond this, if one can believe it possible, they go even a little further. Nirvana, which is already a negation enough in itself, is described in one text as no better than a dead stump, to which to tie your donkey, and it is insisted that when you attain to it, you realize that no one has attained anything whatsoever. Perhaps I can put this in a more intelligible fashion. These doctrines first emphasize the somewhat grimly obvious fact that man has no abiding future. Without exception, everything that we attain or create, even the memorials that survive our death, must perish without trace, and that our quest for permanence is pure futility. Because furthermore, happiness exists only in relation to misery, pleasure, in relation to pain. The perceptive man does not try to separate them. The relation is so inseparable that, in some sense, happiness is misery and pleasure is, because it implies pain. Realizing this, he learns to abandon all desire for any happiness separate from misery or pleasure apart from pain. Naturally, however, this is hard to realize. I can perhaps understand verbally and intellectually that in desiring pleasure I am trying to quench my thirst with salt water, since the more I get pleasure, the more I must want it. And remember the old meaning of want as lack. To want pleasure is to lack it, but still I seem unable to be rid of the emotional habit of desiring it. If then I see that the desire for pleasure burns me by its implication of pain, I begin to desire not to desire nirvana, to seek to give up body. In this, however, I have simply converted nirvana into another name for pleasure. For pleasure is by definition the object of desire. It is what we please, which is to say, what we desire. If I discover that desire is suffering, and then desire not to desire, it is for this reason, then, that Buddhism suggests nirvana with terms that are negative and void, and not with the positive and desirable imagery which surrounds the notion of God. Nirvana is equated with shunyata, the nothing beyond nothing, to suggest that it is simply impossible to desire it. Whatever we are able to desire is still pleasure implying pain. Nirvana, release from suffering and desire, is called unattainable, not because it does not happen, but because there is no way of seeking it. Now the point of the emphasis upon impermanence is that every object of search of desire is in the end ungraspable and futile. To be delivered from futility, we must stop seeking. To seek for God, to desire God, is merely to drag him down into the level of futile aims, or in Christian language, to confuse the Creator with his creatures. Likewise, to desire nirvana is simply to make nirvana another name for ever elusive pleasure. So long then as we think about God, talk about God, seek God, there is no God to be found. Now, from the standpoint of Western culture, whether ancient or modern, Christian or secular, capitalist or communist, this is the great heresy. For Western culture is dedicated to the belief that there is a formula for happiness. All political propaganda, all advertising, and most of what we call education is based on the assumption that there is a way and that it's only a matter of know-how. If some of the details haven't quite been worked out yet, Just give the scientists a few more months and they'll have it. Well, when do we grow up in a profession which combines philosophy, religion, psychology, and education? You meet so many people who have the answer, the great formula for human happiness. Thus, anyone who talks a lot about philosophy and psychology is supposed to be one of those who has the answers and is more or less automatically cast in the social role of savior, preacher, counselor, and guide. The man who knows the way, but there is no way. Nobody knows the way. The only way that there is the path of a bird through the sky. Now you see it, though. Now you don't. Not a trace left, because life is not going anywhere. There is nothing to be attained. All striving and grasping is so much smoke in the clutch of a dissolving hand. We are all lost, kicked off into a void the moment we were born, and the only way is to fall into oblivion. This sounds terrible, but this is because it is a half-truth. It cannot be described, imagined, thought about. In words, this is the last word. Everyone is dissolving into nothing, and no one can help it. Is it possible, just for a moment, to realize this without jumping to conclusions, without crying pessimism, despair, or nihilism? Is it too impossible to admit that all our well-laid traps for happiness are just so many ways of kidding ourselves that by meditation, psychoanalysis, Dianetics, Raja Yoga, Zen, Buddhism, or mental science, we are somehow going to save ourselves from that final plop into nothing? Because if we do not see this much, then everything else in Asian philosophy, in Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, must remain a closed book. To know that you can do nothing is the beginning. Lesson 1 is I give up. What happens now? You find yourself in what is perhaps a rather unfamiliar state of mind. Just watching, not trying to get anything, not expecting anything, not hoping, not seeking, not trying to relax, just watching without purpose. I should say nothing about what comes next. To hold out hope to promise a result spoils the whole thing. The final word must be, there is no hope, no way. Yet there is no harm in just one more word about what lies on the other side of despair, provided we all understand that this something on the other side of despair cannot be hoped for and is in any case thrust away by hoping. The proverb says, a watched pot never boils. We are all familiar with the many involuntary acts of the human body, which never happen so long as we are trying to make them happen, so long as we are anxious about them. Going to sleep, remembering a forgotten name, or under certain circumstances, sexual excitation. Well, there is something like this which happens upon the soul condition, that we are not trying to make it happen, that we have realized quite clearly that we cannot make it happen. In Zen it is called Satoyi Silen awakening. Perhaps we can see now the reason for the double meaning in the metaphor of the bird's path in the sky. Just as the bird leaves no trace, no record of its flight upon the void, so human desire can gain nothing out of life, but to realize this is at once to become the sage, since the greatest wisdom lies on the other side, immediately on the other side of the greatest despair. It is, of course, something more than despair, a joyous sense of creative life and power, I might even say a security and certainty beyond any imagining. But this is a way of feeling which the will and the imagination are as unable to bring about as to make one's bones grow or decrease the speed of the pulse. They must happen by themselves. In the same way, all that is positive, the whole creative content of that spiritual experience, which is called awakening, Nirvana must of necessity happen by itself. It not only cannot, but must not be induced by trying and willing, since anything that one could will wouldn't be it.